Students, today we will explain some basic uses of the Huawei Firewall. First, the Huawei Firewall in EST can be managed using either the console port or the MGMT, which is a network management port. There are these two methods. For example, if we double-click to open, it's actually this page. It's a console port connection page. How can we prove it? We can use a PC and then add one. Using a console cable, we connect it. And when you click, it will display a console port voice connection. Then we click Start, and after starting, we click on the console area, then click Connect, and that's it. Some settings like baud rate or other data bits, etc. are all default. In actual scenarios, we might need to make some modifications. Then click Connect, and you can connect. This is our connection page, which also proves that the page we opened by double-clicking is actually a simulated console port login page. Besides that, we can also connect to the MGMD port and perform a Layer 3 management. So, how do we manage it? First, we need a network card. We simply open the run box and enter the command hdwwi's utility. Then proceed to add. You need to add manually, and then select our network adapter. Select Microsoft, then choose our loopback network card and click Next. Finish the process. This is because we need to reinstall the necessary WinPCAP application. We proceed to reinstall it. Click Uninstall. Of course, before uninstalling, we need to stop these devices first. Then click Close. First, we can save but we can also choose not to save and reconfigure it if needed. For example, I click and choose not to save, then I'll set it up again later. Now let's reinstall it. After installation, open ESP again. Then, as we did last time, first drag a firewall and let it start. Then add two PCs in our cloud. In this cloud, let's check if our network card is there. If it is, we click on it. This IP address is configured by me, and we first add it, then add a UDP. Add it, then click on 1 and 2, so they can communicate bidirectionally. After completing this, we can connect it to the G000 port, which is Wang Xiaoqiang's default MGMT or management port. We proceed to connect it. After connecting, we can add its address, which is 192.168.1.1. Then its gateway is 192.168.1.254. 2.1, and its gateway is 2.54. With this, we are done. Now, what about the address inside it? First, you need to manually configure the network card with an address from the 192.128.0.0 subnet. Why is that? Because our G00 port, which is the default management port of the firewall, has a default IP address of 192.168.0.1. This is its default configuration in this area, so we need to configure it as a network. A small segment, then you can directly communicate. For example, let's take a look. through a web page. Then we enter an HTTPS in the browser. 192.168.01, and its port number is 8443. Of course, first of all, this access, it is still unsuccessful now. This is because the default configuration of the 000 port varies with different firewalls. First, we use the console interface to check the configuration of the 000 port. Our default username is admin, and the default password is admin at 1 and 23. So after you succeed, it will ask you if you want to change the password now. You should choose Y. If you choose N, it will exit directly. We then re-enter the old password. Then enter the new password. And then confirm the new password again. After completing this, we enter System View to go into the System View, and then enter this G. Let's take a look at the configuration or G of this default MGMD port. By default, it has an IB address configuration, but it actually lacks one thing called the Service Manager. APS permit. This, in different versions of the firewall, may or may not be configured. So we add this Service Manager. What does it mean? We will explain it later. After doing this, we can proceed to access it. It will prompt you whether to continue accessing, and you should definitely choose to continue. Choose to accept the risk and proceed. Then select our username, which is admin, and enter the password that you changed in the console. Then we can access its external page for management. This is our basic operation. Once we learn how to log in, we need to proceed with configuration. Firstly, Huawei's firewall has the concept of security zones. This is a logical concept. If you want to use the firewall interface, the interface must be added to a security zone. Networks that are not in the same security zone cannot directly access each other because they are controlled by security policies, meaning the firewall needs explicit permission to allow communication. However, there is a special case, which is the G00 port, because the G00 port is a management port, and by default it is placed in this security zone. We can use the display command to check that this interface is by default in the trust zone, so it doesn't need to be added to the security zone again to be used. However, other interfaces are not like this. Then it also has these 4 default security zones: local, trust, untrust, and FDMZ. The trust zone has a relatively high level of trust and is generally used to connect internally. And the untrust zone, it is generally used to connect to the external part of the enterprise, indicating an insecure zone. The DMZ is a demilitarized management zone, usually used to host some of our front-end servers. And the local zone, all firewall interfaces belong to our local zone. This will be explained in detail later. For example, we now have a diagram like this. So PC2, it is in the untrust zone. And PC1, it is in the trust zone. Then, if your PCE wants to access PC2, because they are now in different security zones, they cannot directly access each other. They need to learn security policies to be allowed through. So, how do you write a security policy? A security policy, it consists of multiple matching conditions, such as what we often refer to as the 5-tuple. Well, TTV, it starts with a protocol, then includes the source and destination security zones, source address, destination address, and so on. With this composition, after we have a general understanding, for example, if my PCE wants to access PCR, this traffic needs to go through the firewall. The firewall matches the security policy. And in the security policy, you need to specify the source security zone and the destination security zone. So how do we write it? First, the network of PC1 is in the trust zone, so your source security zone should be the trust zone. How do we write it? Let's take a look. I'll move a position first. We write a circle security policy, which is a security policy, and then we write rules inside it. I give the rule a name, for example, PCE accessing PC2. Then I write the security zone called south, and then there's the concept of a zone. And we learn that our source security zone is cast, and the destination security zone is entrance. In addition, you can also specify our source address and destination address precisely. So with 32 bits, it's an exact match, and the destination address is 192.168. Then it's also an exact match. And finally, there's an action, which is whether you allow or deny. If you allow, then as long as this security policy is hit, you can permit it. But if you deny, then as long as the security policy is hit, it will be rejected. So we are permit. So after writing it like this, is it done? Yep, not yet, because first, your interface hasn't been configured with an IP address. Let's configure the IP address on this interface first. Okay, so after configuring it, I mentioned that if you want to use this interface, it must be added to a security zone. How do you add it to a security zone? It's called Farewell Zoom, and then you follow it with the security zone. We put the internal one into the trust zone and need to add interface G100. And also, untrust is the network inside here, right? Okay, do this. Interface. So now we are done. And we have also written our security policy, which allows from trust to untrust, right? That means this address can access it. So now it's possible. Let's configure this address first. After we finish this, we will test it again. Our point, 2.254, is an interface in this direction, but it's still not reachable because this interface itself belongs to the local zone, so we cannot access it directly, but accessing the PC. There should be no problem. This way, we can directly see from the ping that our security policy is very successful. Now, the next question is, for example, if I want to access an interface of the firewall itself. So why is it unreachable? For example, in my security policy, I haven't included anything related to the local zone. I mentioned that the local zone is related to the firewall's own interfaces. Because all of the firewall's own interfaces belong to the local zone, and when I add an interface to another security zone, what does this mean? It means the network segment connected internally. For example, If I add this interface to the entrance zone, then the adjacent network is placed in that zone. The untrust zone does not represent the interface itself. It belongs to the entrance zone. So we need to have this concept. When we write, for example, if the trust zone is accessing the firewall interface itself, then to access the local zone, it should be written as PCE accessing the firewall itself. So our original zone is still the trust zone, and the destination security zone is our local. Then we can specify the source and destination addresses. What about its destination address? For example, these all belong to the IP addresses of the firewall's own interfaces. Let's say I use the interface's IP address, which is 192.168.2.54. Then finally, I assign an action, issue. After this configuration is completed, is it ready? Let's take a look. Still not working. So what is the reason for this? Because in our Huawei method, there is interface access control for certain access controls on the interface itself. What we just talked about is called a security policy, right? So what is it called under this interface? It's called interface access control. For example, under the MGM D-port interface we just mentioned. We configured a service manager, which means the result is the access control APPS is allowed. So what about this? This is called our interface access control, which means that when our traffic comes from this side, there is no security policy written to allow it through this security zone for our firewall 1. It accesses the local security policy, but it can still access. Why is that? It's because interface access control is enabled. When there is interface access control, we need to configure interface access control instead of configuring security policies. For example, each of our interfaces has this interface access control. This interface is also configured, but it does not have explicit services allowed. So even if you write a security policy locally, it won't work. So if I want to allow access, I need to permit this one. Which service do I need to allow? Let's take a look. The film package is our pin service, right? Service. Okay, we can directly commit to allow it. This way, once cloud computing comes from this side, it can access successfully. This way, it can access successfully. The concept here is that our interface access control takes precedence over our security policy. If you have enabled structural loop control under this interface, even if you write it in the security policy, you allow access. But if the access control does not permit it, it still won't work. Because it takes precedence. Does this control have any relation to the security policy? It doesn't. For example, even if I don't have this rule, access can still be successful because our interface access control takes precedence over the security policy. That concludes our sharing for today. If anyone is interested in Huawei certification or Huawei topics, feel free to leave a comment below my video. If you are also interested in Huawei's firewall technology. If you have any questions, you can also leave a comment below my video.